Thank you.
Well, this is an interesting topic here, and I've joined the input that's being given us by the witnesses, and I want to go to an issue relative to what both Governor Rendell and Mr. Edwards are talking about, and that is the role of the federal government, the impact of keeping it within a political process. You used the example, Mr. Edwards, of Amtrak. You know, when the political process intervenes in the decision-making process, it distorts the market. And while Amtrak running up the East Coast is a demonstrated market, stops in your state, Governor, and yet in order to continue to subsidize that program, I'm not going to name any particular states, but the line that runs from A to B better stop in Timbuktu to pick up the 2 passengers a month that get on there, or I'm not supporting anything that's going to stop in Philadelphia or going up the coast. And that's just a small example of what we run into. So I wonder, how do we address that? How do we pull all this, how do we define the federal role in a way that the politicization process doesn't distort the market, in a way that discourages investors from the private sector, in a way that misallocates money out of the taxpayer pocketbooks? Any comments? I'll start with you, Governor,
Sure.
and then Mr. Edwards would like you to.
Well, let me start off with the fact that you've dealt successfully with one of the problems, and that's overregulation of particularly transportation infrastructure. MAP 21 did a very good job in reducing some of the regulations and cutting timelines. The President, as you know, has issued an executive order to cut those timelines by 50%. That would be enormously helpful to us, both on cost and getting things done quickly. So you've already done that. But the way to get politics out of the major projects, you're still going to have to give states basic grants to help them with their overall needs. But to take a good hunk of what the federal commitment is, give it to the infrastructure bank for projects of, as Mr. Puente said, national significance, and let states or groups of states or private entities come in and compete. And the infrastructure bank makes those decisions based on cost-benefit analysis, based on, you know, a review of the project to see whether they're workable, whether there's a reasonable return on the investment. That's one way of doing it. A second way of doing it is through the Tiger grant process. The best thing about Tiger, one, it allowed states to combine in applications, so we got regional projects. Two, Tiger leveraged private investment. And three, it was competitive. And the decision was made by federal DOT, and most of Tiger's decisions were based on cost benefit, not on politics. Every state didn't get a project out of Tiger. Tiger funded the major projects. So the more competitive you make it, and the more you give the decision making, I know Congress is always loath to devolve decision making to someone else, but if you give decision making to people who are experts and who are somewhat insulated from the political process, we can do this. We can absolutely do it. It works in Europe, and it can work here.
Yeah. Mr. Edwards, do you want to respond to that?
You know, part of the idea with an infrastructure bank is to get more private financing in infrastructure, and that's great, and I'm all for that. But the problem with having a federal national infrastructure bank is that the decision-making on infrastructure projects become, you know, national and ultimately political decisions. I can name you agency after agency, Army Corps of Engineers, on down the list, where politics intrudes decade after decade, and you just can't get around it at the federal government level. We need to decentralize decision-making. The people spending the money need to be raising the money and spending it so that they can make the proper cost-benefit analysis. High-speed rail is a good example of this. You know, if California wants to raise its own money, as it has, with bonds, and go for high-speed rail, you know, good for them. Let them experiment. The rest of the country, the other 49 states, can watch, you know, how well the system works and decide themselves whether they want to go down that route. But the problem with federal intervention is it distorts the decision-making by state and local governments. And one good example of this, for example, federal grants for urban transit. A lot of the money over the years has gone to light rail. Cities have gone for light rail systems when bus systems would probably be more efficient because the federal government pays the capital cost. The light rail systems have high capital costs. Cities figure, well, let's grab the federal money for the capital cost for the light rail, even though really in the long term, bus systems are usually always more efficient. So I'm really concerned about the problem when the federal government intervenes. It distorts that more efficient state local decision making.
How do we get around when I talk to mayors, governors, and other, they say, you know, so much of our early cost and so much of the decision making and the timelines are skewed simply because we continue to run into lengthy, almost never-ending environmental impact statement challenges to those and so forth. We have that going on in our state right now. As well as the permitting process. I'd like to have whoever wants to.
Well, again, you did a good job on that in MAP 21, and the president's executive order cutting the timelines for environmental impact statements. Some of them take 7, 8 years to complete.
Right.
There's no reason under God's earth that it can't be done in 6 months. You know, if you tell people they've got unlimited time, they will use unlimited time. If you tell
Sounds
people,
a lot like Congress.
well, right. I always use the example of someone comes into a law firm and says, I need an opinion letter, and I need it next Tuesday. And the head of the firm says, oh, this is a respectable firm, and we could never do it in that short period of time. Pulls out of his pocket a cashier's check for $1 million. They get it done. They get it done. If you give 6 months for an EIS to be completed with only the most stringent waiver provision, it's amazing how it would get it done. When we prepared for stimulus, I wanted Pennsylvania to spend our money quickly because I knew the stimulative effect on road and bridge. I called my contractors in. I said, you usually get 6 months to respond to an RFP. You have 2 months. You've told me nobody's working, so you've got 2 months. And I said to my bureaucrats, usually it takes 6 to 9 months to award. You've got 2 months. And we had people working with stimulus dollars in 3 months. Congressman Oberstar's committee ranked the states on how quickly they spent the transportation stimulus money. We were tied for first with 3 other states. It can be done. It can be done. That's where Congress can, I think, really do something terrific by insisting that it gets done.
Yeah, I want Mr. Poole to respond, but I just want to say, Governor, with your permission, I want to take some of those quotes that you just said. I'll make sure you have attribution for those quotes, but I'm going to be repeating the quotes of a Democrat governor all over the place, all over the state of Indiana.
No question.
I think Governor's points about getting the time for environmental reviews much shorter it illustrates that we made some progress with MAP 21, but it isn't really where we need to go. It should be much shorter than that with time certain, time periods. But it's also the question that I've raised briefly of the higher cost of a federal dollar. Many states won't take federal, try very hard not to use federal dollars on highway projects unless they absolutely need it, because Buy America, Davis-Bacon, these other things that Congress has imposed mean the cost is much higher. And now, Buy America, FHWA has administratively decided that now it applies to utility relocations as well, that everything that is used in a utility relocation has to be made in America. Utility companies have no idea where their stuff is made. They don't have the inventory systems to do this, so it's threatening to hold up billions and billions of dollars of transportation projects over a new administrative interpretation.
Thank you, Mr.